How to negotiate continuing to work remotely. Hi HN. Like many of you, I am working remotely due to COVID. I want to continue working remotely, but my job wants me in the office next month. How would you negotiate this with your employer? Have any of you already had this conversation? How did it go? Don't negotiate. Dictate. I'm not joking either. I tried negotiating this, pre-COVID, only to get a final offer of a measly couple of remote days, etc. Being on the spectrum, I took their word at face value, found another job that does 100% remote, and put in my resignation. Surprisingly, that absolutely final position wasn't that final anymore, and they'd have rather had me remote than not at all. Had the new job not been a lot better substance-wise, the whole exercise would have been total waste of time. Of course, you'll want to dictate from a position where you can follow your ultimatum if need be. The nearing end of COVID is where people like us can, indeed must, make a stand against the returning suffocating madness of boring commutes, noisy open-plan offices, incessant context switches, against sacrificing one's creativity, flow and personal space to placate the emotional instincts and biases of the excessively social who rarely do the heavy lifting in our sector. Stay determined, and keep up the good work. Greater than being on the spectrum. You don't think that is why you made a suboptimal choice. I think that's why you incorrectly think you made a suboptimal choice. They might regret losing you, but that doesn't mean that good things would have happened if you tried to apply leverage before. The act of trying to force one to do something, whether by implied threat, logic, emotional manipulation, or whatever, can mortally wound a relationship, making getting a concession you want moot. As you say, the new job was a lot better substance-wise, so it's a good thing you didn't try to hold their feet to the fire. Greater than boring commutes. They're not just boring, they're dangerous and expensive, especially if you're commuting by car. Commutes are responsible for a 9.91% drop in hourly wages. Using the media commute time, a commuter might spend close to 10 days per year just commuting, and in some cases it's closer to 2 full weeks. Greater than in the area with the longest average commute, New York, Newark, Jersey City, commuters are spending an average of 13 days, 2 hours, and 26 minutes driving to and from work. That means that 14 vacation days a year are barely covering the time it takes to get to work every day. So in addition to dropping the average wage from $34.71 per hour to $30.15 per hour, in order to get 14 days of hanging with their family on a beach, New York commuters must be willing to spend nearly as much time sitting in a car. 1. Don't negotiate. Dictate. If you're already in place and have proven that you're good at what you do, this is the way to go. I wanted to let you know that I'll be staying remote from here on out. This last year has been a huge improvement in quality of life for me, and honestly I couldn't imagine working out of an office again. I'd love to stay with you guys, this is a great team, so let me know if that's an option. If not, I'm sure I can wind down my projects by next month. Good developers are hard to find, and the market right now is on fire, so you're a lot more valuable to them than they are to you. Even back when that was less the case than today, this was my standard method of negotiating things like long leaves of absence and shortened work weeks. I've written about it previously. Greater than. Don't negotiate. Dictate. Everything is a negotiation. You have only limited power over your employer. If you think you can dictate, you don't understand the relationship you have. If what you think dictating works, that is because it really is a negotiation and your employer decided they will meet your demands. Dictating may get you a label attached, that you are hard to negotiate with, fussy, capricious, etc. Don't do it. It is much better to sound reasonable because it has much better chance to be met with reasonable answer. You also need to consider what this looks like from the other side. An employee has looked a new role, interviewed for it, and been given an offer. That's a strong signal that they're unhappy and looking for the exit. You may say the fact you're not remote is the reason, but what if it's also about money, or the work is boring, or there's friction with your manager? The only information the company has is what you're saying, so it's likely to be incomplete. Whenever someone on my team has approached me to say they have a better offer but they'll stay if I can match the terms, I've always recommended they take the offer even if I'd be sad to lose them. Keeping someone on the team who is unhappy enough to go through the hiring process and find a new role is a short-term fix at best. Companies are well accustomed to bullshitting employees, so many people do fall for their lies. Or they may have not been lying but just reacting to circumstances. They can't give everyone everything needed to make everyone stay if they threaten to leave, but they can do it for the one who does actually threaten to leave. As a team lead, I don't believe in convincing someone to stay if they took an offer. Their heart and soul has left the building. Not saying you made the wrong choice, but I would have never taken the counter offer, and really, to be in a dictating position, I would have had the job offer ready before any talk that would result in not getting what I want. If a company needs an incentive to keep you, chances are they might revisit their incentives when you least expect it and let you go at a later date. Well, actually, what you did was negotiate, but with the leverage of a good BATNA. Having a good BATNA is what makes negotiation much easier and much more likely to be to your advantage. In things like a job negotiation, it's also evidence of objective market conditions, i.e., it's not just you being unreasonable. How to negotiate continuing to work remotely. Sorry, but I'm currently not accepting in-office work. If my employment is contingent on new in-office policies, I'm afraid I'll be tendering my resignation. You're much better off at a company that actively offers remote work instead of browbeating your current employer into conceding it to you. In the latter case, you will always be seen as a second-class citizen, and they will never take your career development seriously. Greater than don't negotiate. Dictate. I completely agree, but for most people it requires them to have something to fall back on, which can be extremely hard to establish in our current economic climate, since it prioritizes businesses over people. The logical position is to treat your, and every, employer as an aggressively exploitative entity that wouldn't hesitate for a microsecond to cut you loose. Build contacts, develop your network, plan your career, and most importantly, actually work consciously towards having absolutely no loyalty, empathy or compassion for any employer. That will still be a more generous position than how any employer will view you, unless they are actively breaching their fiduciary duties. Greater than don't negotiate. Dictate. I would take that advice with a massive grain of salt. I know someone that was working for a company that wasn't exactly working with state-of-the-art tech. He pretty much dictated how he wanted to work there, iMac instead of a really weird PC setup, modern tooling instead of C++, which he really disliked. He went totally megalomaniac, negotiated even different working hours, went with taxi to work, and 2 years later he had some kind of burnout and had to pause working for a year. In his own words, he wasn't able to program anymore. I think he completely lost it. That said, there are plenty of places offering long-term remote. Why would you work for a place that you need to force to give you the treatment that another place would be happy to give you? Probably with the job change it's even possible to get a little extra salary. Greater than found another job that does 100% remote. Absolutely this. The market for talent is going to be incredibly hot in the coming months. You should have no problems finding remote work. Every situation is different, but I wouldn't use it as an ultimatum. If you see cockroaches in the kitchen, then there's probably rats. If your leadership doesn't have the maturity to look past their dogma and continue a successful experiment, what other bad decisions are they making at your expense? Greater than don't negotiate. Dictate. This comes a privileged position. There are many developers who don't have that kind of sway with employers. The most likely option is, if you threaten to leave, employers will just say, okay, go ahead, and easily find a replacement. It depends. Most digital companies will accept remote so long it is in the same state or country. But other countries and time zones are the demarcation line, so to say. Often due to taxes or regulations. Some FAANG plus Twitter have many forever remote positions, but with geographic limits. Nearing end, our CEO just stated that between the large pool of unvaccinated people worldwide and the rise of new mutation we look at least 2 years of not normal. Also, he said we're going for 60% in office soon. But my direct manager just says, whatever comfortable situation you can arrange with your team is fine. Greater than surprisingly, that absolutely final position wasn't that final anymore. I've been in this position a couple times with pay raises. And to be honest, once this happens the job is more or less dead for me anyway. To only pay me what I asked because I'm leaving absolutely obliterates my trust. If you take this advice, remember that there's a good chance you'll be fired, so there's that. Also, it's wrong and arrogant to make the claim that there is universal disdain for office work. You can have your view, that's fine, but don't assume that it's consistent with the views of others. I manage people and have some advice. Start with, I'd like to be converted to full remote, what's the process for that? The answer is probably I don't know, but I don't think it would fly. Insist that your manager ask up the chain for an official answer. If the answer is nope, next say, I'm not comfortable returning to the office for health reasons. Will I be fired? This is two-pronged. A. It introduces private healthcare decisions, a legally fraught topic they do not want to deal with. Is it legal to fire someone for refusing to return to the office despite health concerns? Probably, but no one knows for sure, and your employer does not want to be the test case. If they ask, what health concerns? Remind them that's private. Don't invent a fictitious medically fragile aunt. B. It may force them to confront the fact that they will lose people over this. They very likely think of WFH as a perk, something they can decide by fiat without consequence. If no one quits over it, that's exactly what it will be. If they stick to their guns, it's time to look for another job, I suppose. If they have some explanation for why WFH is bad, productivity is down, look at this graph, or the value of hallway conversations or whatever, I wouldn't bother arguing unless it's a small enough company that you can argue with the person who made the decision. At Ineptech knows what he's talking about. Follow this advice. Here are some more ideas to consider. Source: 18 plus years of experience as an engineer, manager, and director. The theme is make your manager's life easy, and he or she will do whatever they can to help you out. Depending upon the size of your company, your manager may have more or less discretion with WFH. Whatever you do, don't put him/her into a corner with an all or nothing demand. Be clear with what you want, but be willing to negotiate how it happens. If you've consistently delivered in the past, you have a tremendous amount of leverage. Believe me, the last thing a manager will want to do is lose one of his/her top engineers, especially given this job market. Make sure they know you have options and you're willing to exercise them, but you really want to stay put. Be patient, but hold a hard line. Most managers are inundated with bureaucracy, which means almost nothing moves fast. Don't be surprised if your request gets pushed down the stack due to the latest fire that needs attention. Keep offering up options that make their life easier. I know, this is about you, not them, but trust me on this one. Make whatever solution you want easy for them. HR says no. Talk to HR, find the loophole. Private healthcare decision sounds perfect. Alright, this one may be a bit more out there. Reader discretion advised. Just do it. Don't come back in the office. Don't make a lot of noise about it, make sure your productivity stays up, and have numbers to back it up. If your manager catches heat, Do whatever is necessary to relieve him or her, then go back to WFH. Greater than A, it introduces private healthcare decisions, a legally fraught topic they do not want to deal with. Is it legal to fire someone for refusing to return to the office despite health concerns? Probably, but no one knows for sure, and your employer does not want to be the test case. If they ask, what health concerns? Remind them that's private. Don't invent a fictitious medically fragile aunt. I used to be a lawyer, though was never a labor/employment lawyer, and I'm having a hard time coming up with reasons it would be illegal to fire someone who refuses to come into the office for unspecified medical reasons. It seems like you've thought about this quite a bit. What would the reasoning be? Employees have lots of protections, some of them related to medical conditions. For example, employees can get access to FML under the appropriate circumstances. But my understanding, having claimed such benefits for my family when babies were born, is that some sort of proof is required to establish eligibility. Are there other benefits or protections that would not require this? Or is there a protected class designation that could be claimed? For the record, I have no dog in this fight. I work for myself and don't have employees, so this doesn't affect me personally. I'm just curious what the arguments are for employees who want to remain remote. Also consider asking for a small pay increase when you start the remote work conversation. Justification is the money the company will save on office space and equipment and utilities and snacks when you're working from home. And then graciously settle for maintaining your current wage, having forestalled any talk of lower/location-based pay for remote workers. Listen to this. As a manager and developer as well, I 100% agree. If you are a great worker and your manager isn't incompetent, they will fight for you up the chain. But don't approach it abrasively at first. That just sets the wrong tone for everyone. On the other hand, if a good manager doesn't care if you quit, it also says a lot. There are developers I was so relieved just quit. It wasn't worth it keeping them. Greater than, if they ask, what health concerns? Remind them that's private. Don't invent a fictitious medically fragile aunt. I don't think anybody needs to make anything up in the midst of worldwide pandemic. This past year is a blockbuster example of why somebody could reasonably be concerned. Greater than A, it introduces private healthcare decisions, a legally fraught topic they do not want to deal with. Weaponizing, perhaps too aggressive a word, private health decisions feels weird to me. The op didn't mention any health concerns, so I'm assuming you're suggesting he just hide behind fictitious ones. Your advice is probably useful and could potentially get him what he desires, but it still feels off to me. It feels especially off because I've seen people use the same approach so they can avoid wearing masks in public. Are you assuming his reasons for not wanting to return are health-related? It would be dubious and dishonest to use that as an excuse if not. I completely disagree with the strategy if you aren't vulnerable to the virus. Negotiate remote on its merits without throwing something emotive in there for your personal gain. Greater than I'm not comfortable returning to the office for health reasons. Will I be fired? If you did this to me I would want you gone. Making disingenuous arguments shows a total lack of morality. Why would I want to hire someone who is willing to lie to get what they want? One thing I would say on claiming health reasons is, from the employer's perspective it might be taken more as I'm not ready to return to the office instead of I don't want to come back ever. They are still going to expect you back at some point, so this may result in just kicking the can down the road. Okay. But you're still literally asking your boss, will I be fired? Not exactly a great negotiating posture. Not a great position to be in overall. Instead, if you're good enough, find somewhere where this isn't an issue. That way you can work however is best for you without literally asking your boss if you're going to be fired. Sheesh. If there are places that are amenable to what you want, quit wasting your time going against the grain and just move on. Even if you got them to agree, it will constantly be an issue. They will always act like they're doing you a favor and continually remind how weird it is that you work remote. Just leave all this behind, it isn't worth it. There are places where they just don't care about this, it just won't be an issue. I will be starting that conversation with my boss later this week. At the end of the day, I think the key thing is you need to be fully prepared to move on if negotiations fail and the current job doesn't deliver what you are after. For myself, I have enough buffer and leads that I am confident I can get somewhere fully remote or at least closer to home, before the savings get uncomfortably low, and so that's my red line now. One way or another, I'm not doing the 2-hour commute again, it's simply not worth it. I'd rather take a pay cut to keep the life I've become used to over lockdown. YMMV, but emo, if you're not prepared to move on and your boss senses this, the negotiation will end right there. Absolutely, people talk about mindset, and this is it. You should be prepared to walk away from a bad deal, going back into the office. However, don't reveal things like you're willing to compromise on salary to work from home. I've made a lot of concessions when I really want something, and thinking back, I didn't need to in many cases. In fact, ask for a raise in the same conversation. Be mentally prepared to ask for more, because you have done a lot more this year working from home than you have working in the office. Key to a negotiation is understanding what the other party wants, and what you want, of course. Why do they want you to work on premise? Wanting your presence is just a means to an end. There could be many reasons, like they think it's easier to control how much somebody works if it's on premise. It might be easier to manage. It might be inertia. They think it's more efficient. Somebody is trying to exert control, or demonstrate to a higher up that they can do so. And so on. You should first try to understand where they are coming from, and then you can try to argue your case, framing it in a way that they can get most of their underlying motivation. Also, it helps to know in advance what you are willing to give up and what not. Are you willing to walk away if you don't reach an agreement? What compromises would be acceptable to you? Helpful comment. So for instance, if OP can address in some way what their issue is, i.e., if it's an easy to manage question, maybe there's a fig leaf to address it. For example, I'll be present on Slack or whatever with a short reaction time during business hours, or whatever. Here's another viewpoint. Sure, the company may be giving something up, letting you WFH. But there are also positives for you and them in terms of productivity, health, etc. Clarify that it's a change, but change happens, and that the positives will outweigh the negatives. Knowing why they want you to work in the office is the first step. Get clarity on that, and that might mean reading between the lines. The boss might be lonely and just want everyone back in the office, but they'll never admit that. Once you have clarity about why they want you in the office, then you can begin to work out how you can craft a deal. 1. The developer market is super hot right now, there are lots of jobs. 2. You seem a capable developer, I checked your personal website. I would approach the relevant contact at the company and ask if you are needed at the office 100% or if there is room for another arrangement, perhaps coming in for key meetings or a few times a month. If not, I would highly recommend looking for a job that supports you working as you'd like to work. If you can, take some holiday to look for and apply to job openings that allow remote work. You are working in one of the best paid professions. There should be little need for you to stay and work somewhere that doesn't support you working the best way for you. Trust your gut. Happy to help if I can. Well, for developers that don't negatively refer to others' specialities as webshit, then yes, there's a lot of jobs available. CTO at Mark Forged here. If you can't work it out with your employer, hit us up. We're hiring remote software engineers. We'll ship you a printer so you can dev from home. Good luck. Like a lot of other commenters have posted, you have options. We have a bunch of Onyx printers at work and the parts are so pretty. The mechanical engineers probably go through $1,000 of filament a week at least. I've been iterating on my hobby printer for a few years now, and like to compare my prints to the Onyx prints for inspiration. I think you guys cheat a little bit since it's such a matte finish, it hides a lot of blemishes. Smile. The one time I printed a part myself on an Onyx, I noticed that the slicer didn't print thin walls and instead left gaps in the part, though. Is that a quirk of the slicer, or did I probably just have a setting wrong? I'm really happy to see you on here and see that you have remote positions. I have a Mark II at work. It's really amazing, the software for it is great, and I plan to fly some parts made with it in a lunar mission. The carbon fiber demo keychain part always blows people away when I invite them to try and break it. For those that don't know, Markforged makes a 3D printer that can embed a continuous carbon fiber strand into each print layer, making for very stiff and strong parts. For what it's worth, I've recently been interviewing candidates who straight up resigned from their previous employer after facing a return to work ultimatum. You can too. I'd like to add that there is a big difference between most of the companies in office with some remote workers and companies fully distributed including leadership. With the former, it's not necessarily a positive work environment being the remote person when everyone else is talking to each other in the conference room, or in the hallway. In other words, even if you do negotiate an exception to your employer's return to office policy, it's likely not a good career move. There are plenty of companies out there who have transitioned to remote first, and the technical skill set is still highly prized. Take advantage.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.